Let's now cross over to link up with Maria Mbaneka, an advocate of the High Court here in the country in regard to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the judiciary and the third arm of the government. Good morning, Wakila. I appreciate your time for joining me here on the broadcast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Asante sana. Now, in regard to the measures so far adopted by the let me just use the term, the judicial system in the country in regard to the coronavirus outbreak and the response. Is the method now, which is in place, working for Kenyans in regard to the dispensation of justice and in regard to lifting the burden off the shoulders of the third arm of the government?
Well, you will know that the judiciary was one of the first arm of state to scale down operations. Immediately, we became aware of the COVID pandemic, so that we saw that the courts were drastically shut down. Not shut down, but services were scaled down. And this was done by the CJ as the head of the National Council of Administration of Justice, together with other legal justice sector players, so that you found now courts were adjourning matters. Those were the directives given by the CJ. The police were not arresting members of the public because of the issue of crowding, and also the DPP, the office of the DPP, was not going to prosecute, matters in court in the sense that plea taking was then a function that was taken to the prisons, and I think the prisons are also part of this decision, so that decisions or hearings or applications were being done from some courts, with regards to plea taking. So we saw an overall approach where the day-to-day operations of the court were actually disrupted. And of course, lawyers who are quite used to a different way of doing things, that is attending to matters in court on a daily basis, are now unable to do so effectively because many matters are either being adjourned or are now being had, online.
Okay, and this is, of course, a method that is global in regard to also courts suspending sit-ins in the midst of lockdown. But how effective is the virtual hearing in Kenya, for instance, in hearing the essential and the most important cases? What is the effect rate of these cases being heard in terms of the electronic method so far deployed by the judiciary in the country?
Well, unfortunately, it's not very effective because it's not been rolled out completely. You will understand that the judiciary has sort of been forced by circumstances to actually adopt e-filing on a larger scale than they expected to. This is something that we've been waiting for a long time as the legal justice sector, that we've been waiting for e-filing to happen. So it's only been rolled out in some courts. What we're seeing more of is judgments being delivered by various judges. Some courts, however, are actually conducting sittings. You'll remember when the deputy governor of Kilifi was arraigned before the court, he was taken to court physically. We have other courts, for example, Malindi and Mombasa, having matters, including, I think, also in Kwale, where they're actually conducting pleas online. But all other matters, especially commercial matters, civil matters, the family division, most of those matters have been affected. And it's actually now led to a call by the president of the Law Society, Mr. Harvey, to have the courts fully reopened. Now, what that means then is that the judiciary will have to look at the measures that they will have to put in place to ensure, one, the safety of their staff, the safety of the court users, including the advocates, and observe, the guidelines that have actually been put out by the government in terms of social distancing. So now we have a situation where the president of the Law Society of Kenya, the branch chairs, are actually reaching out to our members because the members are quite affected by the loss of, attendance in court on a day-to-day, especially from 9 to 5. where their matters are not proceeding. So we are required now as members of the Law Society to submit our views about what would be practical in the wake of this pandemic.
All right, before I come to the staffing aspect and the infrastructure, of course, across the country, more or less, because the third arm of the government where you subscribe to, more or less, is undertaking a devolved system of course, rolling out justice across the country. Isn't then the suspension of criminal proceedings in the country a violation of human rights according to the Constitution?
Well, you see, what I'm saying is that it is not stopping. What has happened is that where the matters are urgent, they are proceeding. Okay, let's get that correct.
Okay.
And they're proceeding in as far as possible where the courts have access to e-filing or online proceedings, they are actually doing so. The only issue is that this is not being applied across the board. So we want a situation where the judiciary is able to apply this across the board. Now, what will happen is that the judiciary then will have to face up to the fact that, the finances to do this, do they have the ability to do it, and how quickly can they turn that around? What is happening, other than just court attendances, you have situations such as the lands registry, which is still closed.
Okay.
As we speak, it's going to be extended. A lot of lawyers practice in that sector. They are unable to complete their transactions because, the registry is closed. And a lot of matters or a lot of titles are stuck either, at the financing level, or banks cannot approve a loan if you had applied for one because they cannot, verify that title. So other than the courts, there are other legal sectors that are actually quite severely affected.
All right. And in regard to, of course, the staffing aspect, and in the process when the dust will settle on the coronavirus pandemic, then the question is, will it not perhaps give the judiciary more piled up in terms of cases and an avalanche of continuous growing cases? And how will the judiciary perhaps be dispensing justice in regard to that within a short time frame for Kenyans to get justice?
What the pandemic has done has actually highlighted to us that it is possible to actually conduct hearings online, because we've seen it piloted in some courts. The second thing is that we have reached the point of no return with the judiciary. They cannot go back to the previous way of doing things. It is possible, so now they will just have to keep rolling it out and fast track it. Number three, what we've seen is that the judiciary has given a directive to the magistrates and judges to deliver pending judgments and rulings. And that is what we are seeing a lot of. We've seen Justice Nyakundi doing it in Malindi. We've seen Justice, there's the Court of Appeal judge is doing it. And this is quite, it's quite effective. So what we are experiencing now is a situation where the judges have an opportunity to write their judgments and their rulings. We hope that it is going to happen across the board from all other courts, because quite a number of pending judgments still exist. So we hope that the judiciary will seize the opportunity. Also, remember, we had a situation where the Court of Appeal was hampered in terms of the judges, and some courts were not sitting, and it was the calendar was very, very small in terms of accessing other stations. So now, with the advent of technology, do we need more judges? That's another question we can ask ourselves, because then we have an opportunity to see that the courts can actually dispense justice using technology. However, maybe what they will need to do is get support staff or legal researchers to help the judges and magistrates clear their workload faster.
All right. Asante sana, of course, I'm sure you're talking about the workload and what awaits the justice across the country in regard to the judiciary. And we'll be talking about the aspect of whether there can be a paradigm shift possibly post-COVID-19 on the digitization of the judiciary and the impact, of course, in regard to the sort of exogenous pressure piled up by the executive and the rejection of the judges, more than 40, who, of course, were approved by the Judicial Service Commission, and the concern that many Kenyans have in regard to access of these court proceedings in the country with regards to the restriction now through electronic platforms and whether Kenyans are digital and whether that platform is available. We'll be coming back to you shortly after taking this story. We have another advocate here on the broadcast live in the studio, and as we continue with the discussion that pertains the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the judicial services in the country. Asante Kaindo for that update here on the program with the continuing coverage, of course, of the coronavirus pandemic and the concerns raised by Kenyans in the diaspora in regard to harassment and discrimination against Kenyans in China and by extension Africans in the cities across China. Now we'll continue with our discussion, but before we do that, breaking news coming to us. Renowned Swahili author and journalist Ken Walibora is dead. He was reportedly hit by a matatu in Nairobi CBD. And to just retake that, renowned Swahili author and journalist Ken Walibora is dead. He was reportedly hit by a matatu in Nairobi CBD. And of course, he was amongst the people who ensured that we had good grasp of Swahili in regard to the books that he authored, that of course include Damu Nyeusi na Hadithi Nyingine, and Siku Njema, Kidagaa, and Mayai Waziri wa Maradhi. I can vividly recall doing my KCSE examination in regard to this book. Asante sana wakili. Philip Mwangale in studio. We still have wakili Maria Mbeneka online, I presume. Yes, we still have her, and hopefully I'm sure she's getting the conversation here in studio. Wakili Philip Mwangale, good morning. Asante. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time. Now, in regard to what we have been talking about with your colleague, Wakili Mbeneka, and in regard to, of course, the concern among many Kenyans is how the judiciary can roll out. It's, of course, undertake its mandate in regard to the coronavirus pandemic in the midst of the calamity, which is the coronavirus. I mean, yes. Will it not be a further burden on the judiciary when even it's doing some important proceedings to electronic or by way of online? And isn't it piling more pressure on it in terms of the already underfunding by the national government?
Thank you for having me. I agree with Senior Maria that the judiciary has done quite a lot during this period. They have tried to put in place mitigating measures. But what my feeling is the crisis that we are facing now, because it is a crisis, aside from the economic crisis and other crises in other
with
spheres.
An impact on all sectors.
Yes,
yeah.
In all sectors of our economy. The crisis we are facing now did not begin with coronavirus. Coronavirus just exacerbated what has been happening in the judiciary, and it exposed the inadequacies that the judiciary has been facing. The issue of funding, the issue of structure and infrastructure in technology has been an issue for a long time now. So these issues have been there. It's just that coronavirus has brought them to the fore. But in as much as the judiciary is doing these things, as Senior Maria has said, there are only few stations that are benefiting from the technological rollout in terms of judges and magistrates delivering rulings and judgments. There are some stations, far-flung stations across the country that do not have that benefit. So the dispensation of justice is not uniform. And that is a question of concern. It is an issue of concern in terms of the rule of law and the administration of justice.
And in this case, then, it was already an existing problem.
This has
further
been
supplemented by, of course,
yes.
the consequences of the pandemic.
Exactly.
So what happens post-corona then for the judiciary? I mean, in terms of ensuring that all these accusations, the lowered public trust, sort of Kenyans being deeply skeptic about the conduct of the judiciary, notwithstanding corruption, cases of judges and magistrates lacking integrity. Then what happens next in terms of putting the house to order when coronavirus ends finally?
I think just like many other things, in life and in the economy as we'll be coming out of Corona, we should get lessons from this period. Because what has happened in the past, and I think this is something that Kenyans need to understand, we have, after independence, before and after independence, we did not really have the benefit of an independent judiciary. The judiciary was controlled then by the government. We only began to realize what an independent judiciary would have looked like after 2002. And that again was stifled to some extent. So we have not really benefited from an independent judiciary. And what has happened is, after the clamor for an independent judiciary, people thought that when the judiciary was now gaining its independence, it was being extracted from government, which was not the case. The judiciary is still an arm of the government. It is still part of government. And the fact that the executive, and I think this must be clear, it is the executive that has sought to control the judiciary. The fact that the executive has withheld funds from the judiciary, underfunded the judiciary, means that the judiciary has suffered what it is suffering now. If you compare with judiciaries across the world, judiciaries that have taken coronavirus and the pandemic in stride, if you compare with the funding they have, the kind of infrastructure they have developed over time, they are better placed to administer justice than we are.
Okay.
Yes.
Good thoughts. Wakili Mbeneka, in terms of the already existing problems that we have been talking about with regards to the capacity question here, besides that, the aspect of the pressure from the executive in regard to underfunding, the slashing of the, of course, estimates provided by the judiciary, how will they undertake this electronic form of proceeding then, when already in terms of cashes they have been stripped off and have been facing consequences of inadequacy in terms of the financial capacity in undertaking its mandate?
I think the executive must step up. This is something that we've witnessed before with the budgets, the judiciary's budget being slashed willy-nilly. What I would expect, though, is that the judiciary will then relook at their budget and now prioritize the infrastructure for technology, as opposed to physical buildings. Because now we have seen with this pandemic, we have had now our eyes opened to the fact that justice can actually be dispensed from anywhere. All you need to do is facilitate everybody involved. So the judiciary must, as a priority, relook at their budget, and the executive must, as a priority, facilitate the funding. And through, of course, Parliament is the one that approves budgets. They should be at the forefront fighting for the judiciary to be able to implement this particular milestone. And I think this is a big milestone for the judiciary. It is a legacy for the CJ. So this is something I would urge the President of the Supreme Court and the CJ, as the leader of the judiciary, to actually take on board. It's an opportunity that the judiciary should not let slip. It is an opportunity where they have goodwill now. And I can see a situation where Parliament will approve the funding of the judiciary in as far as rolling out e-filing across all stations and ensuring that this access to e-filing is also felt by the Mwananchi. Because remember, you have situations where people do not have access to computers, do not have access to smartphones, do not even have access to lawyers. How do we get the Law Society also involved in this? So there's an opportunity here for the CJ, all the players of the legal justice sector, to actually support the rolling out of e-filing across the board. It will help. Even you can see those people in remand now, they are actually being let out of remand and being asked to come back for the hearing of their cases at a later date. And it has shown us some of these congestions in our prisons are quite unnecessary, that they don't have to physically go to court to have their matters heard. It's a huge breakthrough, and I think the judiciary should embrace it.
Of course, that is the important element of now embracing technology and the digitizing element of the judiciary. But then again, even as that remains an overwhelming priority in terms of what needs to be undertaken by the Maraga-led institution in the country, how has the COVID-19 then further impacted the already existing complication the already existing problem of infrastructure across the country that were brought to halt because of funding and in some capacity or aspect done deliberately by the, of course, executive in wanting to cut to size the judiciary, of course, now taking stock of what transpired on the first day of September 2017 when the Kenyan judiciary became the fourth in the world and the first in the continent to, annul presidential elections in history?
Well, the judiciary exercised its independence in September when they annulled the elections, and anyone should have expected whatever outcome. I think you're talking about revisiting, whether the judiciary was revisited.
Yes, we shall revisit.
And we have seen whether as a country we have seen this revisiting happen. The fact of the matter is that the actions of the executive have actually hampered the operations of the judiciary. When the budget of the judiciary was just slashed unilaterally, that was in effect cutting down to size, as you say, of the judiciary. Now, my only concern is that you have three arms of state not talking to one another, and these are interdependent institutions, if you may, in as much as their independence is exercised by the way they make decisions. Parliament should have been on the fighting side for the judiciary, and they did come through later. The executive should have consulted the judiciary, but we didn't see this happening. So that frosty relationship obviously was carried on from 2017. Mm-hmm. What we want to see now is that, when they say, the Swahili say that, is it fahari wawili wakipigana nyasi ndio inaumia. The mwananchi and of course us lawyers ndio tunaumia, because look, we cannot represent our clients in court. Our clients don't have access to their matters. Their justice is being delayed. And you know what we say, justice delayed is justice denied. So what we want to see now, in the way the government has come together, both at the county level and the national level, to fight the COVID pandemic, we should look at access to justice as a key factor in our governance system. Because if you don't have the public confident with the judicial system, and if you don't have the public feeling that their matters are being heard, what will happen is that the public then resorts to all kinds of vigilante justice. They then resort to taking the law into their own hands, and you have a breakdown in law and order. Yet you have situations where the courts listen to election petitions in a record 6 months, from the High Court to the Supreme Court. Why can't we have the same speed in all other matters? And I'm saying this is possible through the ADR. It is possible through using technology. Mm-hmm. We have seen it is possible, and we have seen that it can work. All we need is to get the goodwill.
Okay, of course, it's lovely to get your thoughts in regard to that, and we'll continue with the independence aspect of it, why, of course, there seems to be an appetite in terms of lessening the capacity of the judiciary in the country, and that has been the continuing point ever since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, which is the advent point of the institutions which are independent constitutional in the country. And we'll be still getting back to you as we engage with Wakili Philip Mwangale here on the broadcast. In terms of the talking about the coronavirus pandemic, which again brings in the aspect or loops in the aspect of independence from the executive's perspective in what it wants in terms of the favorable decisions, which of course is unlikely according to the Chief Justice David Maraga, who said we'll only act by the evidence presented before the courts of law. Talk to me about the essence of now collaboration. What Advocate Maria did say was interdependency, which is element. Yes, as much as they are dependent, they should be interdependent. So how does this help in terms of decongesting our prisons when you see the Chief Justice, the Inspector General of Police, the DPP Nordin Haji, the EACC, the Chief Executive Officer Twalib Mbarak at the same podium talking about aspects that regard rolling out of justice in the country during this needy time in the country? Will it help, and was it needed before, despite the, of course, sort of disjointing efforts that we have seen from the criminal justice system?
That was it was a breath of fresh air, what they did. And I must say this, the synergy that we saw on that platform is a synergy that we expect to see going forward in the administration of justice. We expect to see the DPP interact with the judiciary in such a manner that justice is promoted. Because what we've been seeing in the past is mudslinging. The DPP on one hand accusing judicial officers and the judiciary as a whole in stifling the fight against corruption. We have seen the executive accusing the judiciary. So the judiciary has been taking a beating from other arms of government. And this has not served the administration of justice and Kenyans at large any good. So I think that synergy should go on. We should redefine and reconfigure the way we do justice. The fact that we have released petty offenders, very many of them across the country, in a bid to decongest our prisons and cells, means that there is something that could be done going forward, so that these people are not held for long periods for petty offences. In the past, and I think this has been happening, though on a very small scale, probation has been taking ground. So I think if we got back to relooking petty offences and what should be done with petty offenders, then we would decongest our prisons further. The other bit that I should mention is this. There has been when we're talking about independence and interdependence, the interdependence bit has been lacking. And this is because what I've mentioned when I was beginning, the fact that the judiciary was gaining independence, but many people saw that as the judiciary being extracted from government. So what is happening right now is the judiciary is struggling to stay alive, struggling to free itself from the shackles of the executive and the blame that has been thrown against it by Kenyans and other arms of government. So I think what needs to happen going forward is for us to relook the whole system. And this will include all arms. It will take the executive, it will take the legislature, and it is true that the legislature plays a very pivotal role in supporting the judiciary. Because, I mean, if the judiciary is supposed to interpret law, then the lawmakers must buttress that institution that is supposed to interpret the law. And it's not just about lawmaking, it's also budgetary, the budgetary process and the budgetary allocations. The legislature should come out very strong in supporting the judiciary.
All right, and of course, this is of course notwithstanding the fact that the Chief Justice David Maraga and some judges have taken pay cut. Of what effect will that be in terms of lifting some pressure, or is it more or less leading from the top or offering lessons from the top?
Yes, that could be it. It's more of a moral issue, an issue of conscience that the country is suffering, and so individually and as an institution, this is what we can do. If you take it in the larger scheme of things in our economy, it might not really have a big effect, but it does something. If judges can take a pay cut, if they can sustain a pay cut, because we must be alive to the fact that there are many people who cannot sustain a pay cut. The situation is dire already. So I think it's a good initiative. It is to show the country that they are suffering together with us, and they can do something to alleviate the pain that the country is going through. Okay,
we'll continue the discussion here on the broadcast. Thank you, Philip Mwangale, for staying with us, and equally Wakili, Advocate of the High Court, Maria Mbaneka, who is still standing by. We continue with the discussion here in the country in regard to the coronavirus pandemic and the impact on the judicial service in the country. We are now joined by Kipchumba Karori, Advocate of the High Court, and a political strategist, a lawyer, of course, in the country, alongside Maria Mbaneka, Advocate of the High Court. And in studio, we have Philip Mwangale, who is equally an advocate of the High Court and commentator on governance and leadership in the country. I do appreciate your time, Wakili Kipchumba Karori. Good morning, and thank you, Wakili Mbaneka, for staying with us, and Wakili Mwangale here on the broadcast. Coming to you first, because of the timing, Wakili Kipchumba Karori, what's the impact? Because we, of course, talked about it from the perspective of Wakili Mbaneka. Talk to me about the impact COVID-19 has had on the judicial service and the dispensation of justice so far in the country.
That, whereas we have M-Pesa shops up and running, the judiciary has been closed. So I think we have a problem. And whereas we have given sweeping powers to the police to arrest everybody, to enforce curfew orders, to enforce containment orders. But it is unfortunate that we do not have a functioning judiciary at the moment. And that also means that there will be lapses and there will be a lot of injustices carried forward. I think going forward, we need to have a discussion on how we can reopen the judiciary amid even the concerns of COVID-19, and even as we talk about social distancing, we must be able to address the issue of technology within judiciary. And as my senior Mbeneka has always done, the issue of technology and all those things, she has a program she runs at the Lawyers Hub. I think we can bring our minds to this and we can do something better and have a technologically savvy judiciary whereby you can do something even on your phone. Because look at it this way, the executive is functioning, parliament is functioning. What is this so unique that the judiciary cannot sit and reinvent the way we do things in a manner that justice will be met and we will also meet the conditions of COVID-19? Take an example today. If coronavirus was to be here with us for a whole year, do you mean the judiciary would close for a whole year? Because not even the people who are employed in the justice sector. You have to look at the clients of the justice sector. What is happening now to the issues, the certificate of urgency, the continuous day-to-day activity? So long as society is still there, problems and conflict will always be there. So we need to ask ourselves, why don't we have a discussion which is not in itself that we are trying to go against the advisory of the Corona Committee, but having a discussion of innovation around how we can dispense justice?
Okay, asante sana. Let me now engage your colleague, Advocate Maria Mbeneka. In terms of the coordinated response that we continue to see with regards to the outlined measures by the government in battling the coronavirus pandemic, and then the impact now spreading over to the judiciary and, of course, the other spheres of governance, institutions in the country, then what's the size and the scale that is needed of the judiciary going forward in regard to now seeing this problem and then post-COVID-19 so that it can function, as is the case with the executive and parliament, even in the midst of the calamity?
Well, with the guidelines, of course, we have to ensure that we maintain social distance. That's the first thing. So what can we do within that context? It is easy. The courtrooms are big. The judicial officers can limit the number of people who will access the courtroom. They can also look at their cause list, for example, and see how many matters can be had online and how many matters actually require people to come to court. Because remember, when you look at a judicial officer's cause list, you have mentions, you have hearings of applications, you have hearing of the main matter where we have several witnesses, and then you have rulings or judgments. So what the judiciary needs to do now is adopt a system where there is efficiency in terms of dispensing or attending to advocates and their clients. In India, for example, the Supreme Court has given guidelines as to how the courts will be accessed and made sure that no one who is unwell will be allowed to enter the court premises for obvious reasons. So you're looking at a situation where the judiciary has to have a system where they will be able to scan, for example, temperature when you're walking into the courts. Do you have a mask on? Are the courtrooms well ventilated? Are your own judicial officers moving from home to the office in a manner that is less likely to spread the virus? So those are the considerations I would be looking at administratively. But if you're looking at it from the advocate's also point of view, this is a situation where we can agree with the judiciary. The matters that are of utmost importance must by nature continue. Those matters which are pending judgments and ruling, let us have those dates given and those rulings sent out electronically. You don't have to appear before the judge to have your judgment or ruling heard. Let us have situations where the matter is proceeding to hearing and you have witnesses. It is certain that we are going to proceed with the taking of evidence. Okay. Let those the witnesses join those proceedings by way of Skype, like we are doing now with you. It is possible. So Judiciary just needs to be brave and grab this opportunity,
Okay.
By the horns, and seize the opportunity, because there's goodwill here. What lawyers are saying is that they want to be able to continue carrying out their duties. What the members of the public are saying is that they want to be able to access justice. And what the executive expects, even after COVID, remember now that the economy has taken a beating. If you have a judiciary that is not functioning, it will take you that much longer to even recover, because the resolution of those disputes that would have otherwise been dispensed of, even during this time, has not been happening.
Okay,
so let us have goodwill across the board.
Okay, talking about goodwill and how bold the judiciary should be is very important in regard to continuity in terms of the independence of the judiciary, which is very important, paramount, and sits pretty much at the pivotal point in terms of balancing the societal affairs in the country and, of course, our republic model. But do you think then that post-COVID, when the judiciary comes up with new measures to ensure that it does play out, or there is continuity in the midst of another calamity in the foreseeable future, because it's inevitable that another pandemic will crop up in future, then that the executive will be in a proper posture to ensure that all the undertakings in terms of the financing by parliament accepted, goodwill from the judiciary will be there, owing to the already infightings and more so the pressure piled on the judiciary for favorable outcomes or for the executive and parliament wants?
I think as a country, not just the judiciary, it is important for us to realize what role each sector plays. Now, the legal justice sector is very, very important, as we've been talking about here. In as much as the doctors who are at the forefront of fighting this pandemic are being given, priority as essential services, people who are providing food. Now, what we need as a country is to better prepare. That means that you must then assign money to any eventuality that would come up. Whereas you have situations where judicial officers might need to work at night. How will they be compensated, for example? How will the judiciary be funded to be able to deal with their staff not being available at work? Because remember, people are going to go on leave. Do you have enough staff? Do you have measures in place where any other player, not just the judiciary, can actually carry on with their duties? In the UK, for example, you have lawyers now wondering what they will do because now that the schools have been told they cannot proceed, the students cannot go to school. You have a situation where, because childcare is very expensive in the UK, lawyers are asking what will happen because they have to stay home and take care of their kids. Because remember, in the UK, they did not stop the judicial proceedings until quite late into the day. So there are situations where we have to really look at our own, at our own landscape and ask ourselves, have we actually assigned enough resources to all workers in critical areas? And I will include the judiciary as the critical areas. The judiciary is underfunded, that's a fact.
Okay.
But the judiciary is also investing a lot in brick and mortar. What is it that we can do to better improve the services of the judiciary? Because that's what we're talking about here. I would say assign more funding to legal researchers, assign more funding to technology, assign more funding to the decongestion of our prisons.
Okay.
Because that's where you have problems which are glaring.
Asante.
And also assign funding to the lands sector, business registration, and so on.
Asante sana, because it's equally important. You have mentioned the lands, of course, courts, where there are more than 17,000 cases, 17,833 thereabout cases, which still have not been resolved, and the matter, of course, ruled upon by the courts. But thank you so much for joining us, Wakili Maria Mbaneka, an advocate of the High Court. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, and thank you for your assessment here on the broadcast. Asante sana. Thank you. Good afternoon. Still, we will be on with Wakili Kipchumba Karori here on the broadcast, and Wakili Philip Mwangale. If I may come to you before we get to this important story which regards the National Assembly that resumed sittings yesterday. On the aspect of continuity purposes that she talked about, and here is the quotation by the Chief Justice David Maraga, who said, and I quote him, "With regards to the new arrests, all cases except serious one will be dealt with at the police station in accordance with the guideline to be issued by the Inspector General." We know that our police stations are ill-equipped, so how will this be effected?
That was very unfortunate, in my view, because this was it's a case where the judiciary is designating one of its key roles to the police. We know what our police, National Police Service, is, and we know how they deal with matters such as those. And if the Chief Justice is to say that if yours is not a serious criminal case, then the Inspector General of Police will give guidelines on how your matter will be dealt with at the police station, that is akin to trying to fix a whole system as you would fixing a puncture. You cannot do that. You cannot fix a system by a mere first aid. What needs to be done is for us to have a wholesome approach in this aspect. If, for example, we are saying that our courts need to be open, then our courts need to be functioning as courts of law. We cannot then now decide that because we have a pandemic with us, police stations will now become courts of law. Okay. I think that was wrong, and it's something that should be corrected, because I am aware, and I know most Kenyans are aware of this, that there is a great miscarriage of justice that is happening in our police stations, even right now, because we have Kenyans who are being arrested, manhandled, and they get to police stations, they end up, some end up paying bribes, some end up being held more than even you would hold a person during this period of social distancing. So we should wholesomely fix the system, the judiciary, and this is something I must say. You know, what is happening right now, we have scaled down. The judiciary is saying we have scaled down the operation of costs of our courts. But if we are to take a comparative study of courts across the world, courts that have really been pragmatic in solving this, I'll give an example of the state of California. The state of California, in fact, are operating on rules that they set when we had the bird flu. I think you remember the bird flu, the outbreak of the bird flu. And so they came up with measures, not just for that specific period, but for posterity. And I think that is what we need to focus on. Because right now, it is the reality on the ground that we have backlog in our courts. So if we are focusing on what we are referring to as essential litigation at this point, then it means that even after Corona is done with us, we will still face the issues that we have faced before, and those issues will be compounded. So we need to address this issue wholesomely, and scaling down is not, it does not really help. We must look at precautionary measures in light of COVID-19 and other measures to stem the judiciary going forward.
Asante sana Wakili Philip Mwangale. We are going for a break. Coming back later, still we have Wakili Kipchumba Karori on set. The discussion continues in regard to the coronavirus pandemic, the impact on the judiciary, how the judiciary will weather this storm, whether post-COVID-19, the judiciary needs to have a paradigm shift in terms of digitizing itself with regards to how Parliament has done so, with 350 top state-of-the-art iPad from Apple company in California, but falling short of doing business with that, and the impact thereafter in a civil society, in a civil liberal country, and the preservation of human rights under the 2010 Constitution. 0791 478 990, the hashtag on Twitter. NewDayKE, the short SMS code is 40920. Later, there are the international news. I'll be giving you the feedback on the Johns Hopkins University, which continues to track the coronavirus pandemic in the world. After the break here on the broadcast, stay tuned. Good afternoon. Thank you for staying with us. You're watching New Day Kenya, and it's about 12 minutes past 12 here on the broadcast. And we continue with the discussion that pertains the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the judiciary, the third arm of the government, the pre-existing problems that have been complications in regard to the independence of the judiciary, the exogenous pressure piled by the executive in some aspects wanting favorable outcome, and the relationship has not been well ever since September 1st, 2017, when President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election was quashed by the Supreme Court, which sat here in the country, becoming the first in the African continent to annul a presidential election and the fourth in the world. The number is 0791 478 990, the hashtag on Twitter, NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. Engage us here on the broadcast, and we will cherish your contribution. Asante sana. Let's now still have Wakili Kipchumba Karori, who is standing by for the discussion in regard to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. He's a lawyer, an advocate of the High Court, and commentator on political and governance issues in the country. Wakili, thank you for staying with us. Now, coming to you in regard to the aspect of Kenya being a constitutional democracy and a constitutional state, in regard to what's transpiring now with regards to the restrictions and the statement by David Maraga, who suspended sittings across courts in the country for 2 weeks after the confirmation of the first coronavirus case in the country, that I quote him, with regards to the new arrests and all cases except serious ones will be dealt with at the police station level. Will this not further lead to violations of human rights in regard to what's now transpiring in the midst of the curfew, where there are reports of police mishandling and mistreatment of the Kenyan population?
Whereas that the position by the Chief Justice is legally and constitutionally wrong, in the essence that you cannot allow the police to be the judge, the jury, and to prosecute, to arrest, prosecute, and judge the person at the same time. That in itself means we have now changed from being a functional democracy to something else. And I think what we should do is we can allow the judiciary to innovate within the sense of allowing that if somebody is arrested, they should be given bail or bond. But by saying to allow the OCS at the police station level to determine what somebody or the amount of bail given one is a miscarriage of justice, because at the end of the day, what you are condoning now is the issue of corruption and the issues of people bribing the police officers. What happens to justice when corruption, bribery, and all other things suffices? Justice will suffer as a casualty. And I think what Maraga must do and must act so immediately is to allow that courts can be open, or he can just make sure that courts are open at the police station so that we take justice to the police station. So that, because the more people move up and down, the more the spread of corona. Why don't we innovate within that? Or secondly, why don't we use technology? We have so much technology around, and it is time the judiciary comes and absorbs this technology. And the other issue of Kenya being a democracy, we are a democracy, and notwithstanding the fact that we are in a pandemic, it doesn't mean we have suspended the rule of law. The rule of law and the wheels of justice continue moving, or albeit they are moving at a slower pace, but the wheels of justice must be seen to be moving. And therefore, to say that because we are in a pandemic and we are suspending some things, I think is to kill the democracy that we have fought for as a country. And the solution going forward should be such that we bundle cases. The issues like these small-time felonies, we can have them being heard on a Tuesday, and then the bigger cases, we can put them in a technology somewhere. And then for those cases that cannot be dispensed with without an open court, we can have regulations. There was a time Justice Ngugi gave very good regulations on how Nakuru courts were to operate before the Chief Justice shut down the entire judiciary. So I think we can build on whatever Justice Ngugi had come up with and have a robust judiciary going forward, because this is a problem that will be here with us for a little longer, and we cannot sacrifice the justice system of this country, because by sacrificing the justice system in the fight against corona, we are sacrificing a third pillar of our republic. Okay. And that will have long and far-reaching consequences going forward.
And in terms of the digital aspect we have talked about, before we come to the civil, civil liberties that the Constitution of Kenya guarantees, and talking about the digitization of the judiciary, of course we have a clerical example in terms of the classical use of more than 40 million Kenya shillings to buy 350 iPads for the National Assembly and the Senate, the bicameral House, and they have not been able to sit, and Kenyans have been skeptical deeply about what if then we have a judiciary that is digitized, money is spent, and then the institution will not be able to use the digital platform in undertaking the business, what happens then? Will it not reveal the held belief that corruption is rife in the third arm of the government?
We are not talking about here the stomach-led procurement. We are talking about solutions to a problem that Kenyans, we must recognize that Kenya as a country is a going concern. And as a going concern, as a nation, conflict will always be there. And as conflict emerges, and with the restrictions given to us by coronavirus and those recommendations, we must be aware that these are things that are here with us. We can choose either to fear that people will eat our money, or we live to the fact that we live with the fear that the money will be eaten, or we venture into the unknown, because it is times of crisis that innovation changes the course of the world. This crisis will change the world for the longest period, from even who will be the powerhouse next, because of the issue that if a country will not adapt to new ways of doing things, Rwanda is already supplying or fighting coronavirus using those drones. What are we doing here is we are still fearing that if we were to go the digital manner, so and so will eat our money. Then the thing is, as a country, we are not serious about anything else.
Okay. Asante sana Wakili. Stay with me for that discussion. Let's engage Wakili Philip Mwangale, who is here in the studio, and thank you for your patience. The aspect about the uncertainty about corruption, and then it brings about the integrity issue. At some point we had allegations, of course, on the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court Judge, that is Philip Tunoi, and then there was the aspect about J.B. Ojwang before he was cleared after the commission fined him not guilty. The aspect about magistrates across the country, corruption, money exchanging hands in terms of dispensation of justice. I mean, will it not again reveal further that there has been a deep underlying problem now supplemented by another problem, a pandemic now cutting short affairs of the judiciary? Then going forward, how do we get out of the deep hole now to the heights of hope in terms of Kenyans who are looking at the judiciary as the last resort of hope in getting justice?
As I've said before, the coronavirus has exposed the underlying issues, underlying problems that we've had, not just in the judiciary, but across all spheres of our economy. And this is the unfortunate reality that this country is in. We have an executive that is overbearing and borderline incompetent. We have a parliament that is impotent on all grounds. And we have a judiciary that is very much suffocated by the executive.
But notwithstanding their cases of corruption equally.
Yes, I agree that we have those shortcomings within the judiciary. And something needs to be done. Things are being done. The Commission on Administration of Justice set up within the Ombudsman, set up within the judiciary, has been cracking down on errant judicial officers. So there are things that need to be done. But that notwithstanding, we cannot run away from the fact that the judiciary is the custodian of the rule of law. That is a clear, it's a clear thing that we must agree to. So we must first start rooting out the problem. And the problem is we have a corrupt value system, not just in our institutions, but across the country. It is a societal problem. So if we only pinpoint specific things that we feel are of issue, then we'll be running away from the larger problem. So we must utilize this opportunity that I think God has given to us to strike at the core of the rot in our society. We must reevaluate our value system, we must reevaluate our governance structures, and we must decide that going forward, we need to be a value-based society. Okay. It is only then that we can bottom up change our institutions.
Okay. Notwithstanding then, how do we end the infightings among institutions in the country? I'll come to the criminal justice system, which is partly, of course, on its own at the moment in regard to the war against corruption in the country. But you have Parliament and you have the executive. Parliament, of course, is the deciding factor here in regard to what budget goes to what institution in the country. And then you have the executive in bad blood with the third arm of the government, the judiciary. Then how do we reestablish the needed relationship as the Constitution 2010 enshrines?
as we are clamoring to establish the rule of law and ensuring that we are implementing the Constitution, there is the other arm of government that I think we must start acquainting ourselves to, and that is the people. The people must keep these three arms of government in check, because when the executive has broken down, when the legislature is not living up to its mandate, when the judiciary is rotten, then the people have to keep these three arms of government in check. So in as much as we might try to appeal to the conscience of our elected leaders, we might try to appeal to the conscience of our institutions generally, we must also as a people stand out to keep our institutions and elected leaders in check. And what needs to be done is fast, and it might take us a while for us to get to that restorative phase at the ballot, but the first thing that we must do is to keep our leaders in check, and that begins with the executive, that begins with the legislature. Because if you have a member of parliament, and this has been clear during this period where members of parliament retreated to their rural homes rather than retreating to parliament to legislate on affairs that touch on their people, we've had citizens coming up to critique what the members of parliament have done. And it is the pressure that, I believe it is the pressure that has been piled upon members of parliament that has led to them resuming sessions to some extent. So we must, it is a concerted effort. It is a joint effort between the people and the elected leaders.
All right. And Wakili Kipchumba Karori, I'm sure you must have been following the discussion here in studio with Wakili Philip Mwangale. Talk to me about then the absence or the lack of the collective endeavor from the institutions that make up the government, the judiciary, executive, and parliament, and what needs to be done. And in the case of the more than 40 judges who are not, of course, after approval, who were, of course, denied access to the institution of the judiciary by the government in regards to the doubts the president had over their capacity, integrity, as per the reports by the National Intelligence Service. How do we better up that relationship and spice it up to be a better functioning body in the country? Do we still have him? Yes, Wakili Kipchumba, to just retake that question, are you getting me?
Yeah, I'm getting you now.
All right. In regard to bettering up the relationship between the executive, the judiciary, and parliament, why do we have the collective lack of endeavor in terms of having a functional three organs of the government? And what's your signal or reading into the denial in terms of the approval of the 41 judges by the president in regard to integrity issues in the judiciary?
You know what we must say is that we have a functionally incompetent democracy, because for a democracy to function, it's like wheels. You have to engage a gear for you to move forward, for the wheels to start moving, for the engine to be on. What we must ask ourselves is, why do we allow us to have the hangover of the pre-2010 constitution, whereby all the institutions we have in this country are held hostage by the executive? For example, why do we allow the judiciary to run in a manner that compromises the quality of the justice system that the country runs on, just because the president has an issue with the names? Why don't we get to a point whereby, by consensus, the three arms of government can function independently? Currently, Parliament is in its deathbed. We don't know where Parliament is. Even when we are facing Corona, we cannot hear them. We are hearing them discussing more of the crisis in Jubilee more than any other thing. So going forward, what we need to do as a nation is to make sure that we elect leaders that know and understand, appreciate the role of each pillar of government. By doing so, we will allow our democracy to move forward, and we will allow progressive realization of the fruits that we have in the Constitution 2010.
Asante sana Wakili Kipchumba Karori. We equally have other important developments in the country in regard to the political aspect, because we need to equally take the sentiments of my able panel here, since they equally commentate on governance and leadership issues. That is lawyer Philip Mwangale and Kipchumba Karori, lawyers Philip Mwangale and Kipchumba Karori here on the broadcast. Later, we'll be taking stock of what Parliament said yesterday in regard to the special sitting where members of Parliament, about 40, have been allowed into the debating chamber. And before we do that, let's have a look at this graphical representation of the all parties that make up the ruling Jubilee Party. My director, can we have that up on air? Yes, there we go. You can see the ruling Jubilee Party folded up more than 10 parties, and they include the Jubilee Alliance Party, the Unity Party of Kenya, New Ford Kenya, TIP, the Grand Coalition, the Grand National Union rather, the Party of National Unity, the Republican Congress, and the United Democratic Forum, the Ford People, the National Alliance, the Alliance Party of Kenya, the United Republican Party of the Deputy President William Ruto. And that is what we have on your screens for purposes of course, understanding the parties that have made up the ruling Jubilee Party. This was in September 2016 when they met at the Kasarani Stadium here in the country to form the party, which was a coalition ever since 2013 when the National Alliance of President Uhuru Kenyatta and the United Republican Party of the Deputy President William Ruto joined hands and won the elections in 2013, the first elections to happen under the 2010 Constitution. Coming to you, Wakili Kipchumba Karori, in regard to the developments that regard, of course, now the Deputy President William Ruto, the changing of the National Management Committee of the ruling Jubilee Party, at some point telling us that they have copied a lot from the Communist Party of China. Unfortunately, I am more interested in knowing what Kenya, a democracy, can learn from a communist state in China, and how will the Deputy President William Ruto head off the accusations that are currently raised by David Murathi, the former vice chairperson, who accuses him of being authoritarian and a leader who does not listen, who is allegedly corrupt and does not deserve to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta?
I think the aspects or the issues raised by Murathi are a concoction, and I can say it's a cocktail of issues. If you want to really get the gist of whatever Murathi is raising, on the issue of whether William Ruto is corrupt or not, we have qualified institutions that can work on that. On the issue of whether William Ruto can succeed Uhuru Kenyatta or not, that is the work of the electorates of this country. We cannot jump the gun. If the electorate feel William Ruto is qualified, when the time comes, he will get the position. But coming back to the germane issue and the issue obtaining, the issue of the Jubilee Party politics, I think what we must understand is that Jubilee as a party is a unique political party. It is one party that emerged from a folding 13 political parties, which were tribal-based political parties. And therein lies the problem. The problem that if you fold a tribal political party, what the tribes in the 13 political parties expects is a space in the table. And now that is even complicated by the fact that we are entering a succession season. We are entering the season when the succession for Uhuru Kenyatta is happening. And that one is made worse by the handshake politics. Because with the handshake politics, our politics was changed in essence that Jubilee did not update its rank and file on what the handshake means, whereas ODM did an update with members that this is what the handshake means to ODM as a party. Therefore, the party started stoking fear, and in stoking fear, nobody will think anybody can do anything for the party with a good heart or a spirit, because therefore, by allowing people to act behind closed doors and by not holding party meetings and party allowing rank and file of the party to meet, therein lies another problem. Communication becomes a problem. And I think Jubilee finds itself in wherever it is now. Because
Wakili, to just pause you, it's very important. You have mentioned three important elements, and I just want to get a clarity on that. In terms of who was to communicate, what is the meaning of the handshake? Who ought to be doing that? Isn't it the president? And why did he not do that to inform the Deputy President William Ruto that I'm bringing Odinga on board for purposes of uniting this country, and that this is the sole responsibility of me leading the institution of the presidency, which is a symbol of national unity? Why didn't he do that?
I think the first misstep of the handshake on the Jubilee side was when the party leader failed to convene the party organs to communicate to the party organs that this is what the handshake means for us. Because as a party leader, you have a responsibility to forge the party in one direction, to make sure that the rank and file of the party understands where the party is coming from and where it is heading. And this being a political party that was formed on a unity and cohesion of the nation platform, the handshake ought to have been a thumbscrew of it to rise beyond where it had reached in 2017. But now the danger is of not doing that. We are where we are because, and with succession politics, you have to understand that as we came to 2017, there was a promise of kumi yake, kumi yangu. So people understand that the Jubilee matrix has a succession already. And when you bring on board the animal that Raila Odinga is, it tends to throw everybody off the board.
All right.
And that is what I'm saying. It is now incumbent before Uhuru Kenyatta to make sure that the political party he leads, the biggest political party in this part of the region, has to sing in one tune. They might not be singing the same stanzas, but at least they must sing one song.
All right, Wakili, thank you so much. We'll be getting back to you to get the final comments because we are running out of time equally. Wakili Philip Mwangale, yes. I'm sure you must have been listening to Wakili Kipchumba Karori and keeping track of the political developments in the country. Yes. What's very clear is that the president and the DP, William Ruto, are not singing from the same political hymn sheet. It's very, very clear. Yes. And the concern is that the Tanga Tanga wing, who support the DP William Ruto's 2022 cause, have an issue with Raila Odinga, not the president. Now, how does the president balance between his DP, whom he said will support in 2022, kumi yangu, kumi yake, and Raila Odinga, who he brought on board to glue this country because of uncertain political times after every electoral cycle?
First, I must add that they're not just singing from the same hymn sheet. One is singing from hymn sheet, the other is singing freestyle. It is left to question who is freestyling here. But you see, let me give this analogy. When a man and woman come together and they're joined together in whatever ceremony for marriage, whoever is officiating, and this happens across the board, and pronounces them husband and wife. The business of them being one is left to themselves. It is not done at that point. The officiation is done. And this is the mistake that Jubilee made. That there were Jubilee party architects did not live on to nurture Jubilee as a party. The people who engineered and made sure that the Jubilee party infrastructure was put in place, they disbandled the other parties and brought together Jubilee, are not within Jubilee, in the core of Jubilee right now. People like Honorable Noah Ekesa. I think Noah Ekesa was one of the people he spearheaded. He spearheaded
in branding the ruling Jubilee party vehicles.
Exactly, he spearheaded the whole of Jubilee. Noah Ekesa was sidelined. He was not involved in the running of Jubilee. And I think it was important now that, as Kipchumba has mentioned, that this was a novel idea. It was a unique one where you are joining together tribal parties. It was important for Jubilee to be nurtured outside the political space, to be nurtured as an institution, a political institution, a political party. But that did not happen. But this is the other thing I must say. What we are seeing right now is a breakdown of leadership within the party. When Uhuru Kenyatta said he was going to give 10 years after his 10 years to William Ruto, I personally feel that was said in the heat of the moment. Because if he really meant what he said, then we will not be seeing the things that we are seeing right now. He will be sticking to the Deputy President, William Ruto. But that said, there are some machinations within the Jubilee party that we cannot forget. There are people who are interested in the seat of power, in the presidency, that are within Jubilee party, and they will do anything to make sure that they have gotten the seat of power. And they consider William Ruto to be a big threat. The unfortunate bit is that the president has not come out clear and expressed his mind. We are learning from his silence that he's supporting those who are fighting William Ruto. But he has not come out clearly to speak out on the people that are assaulting the deputy president. So in the coming few months after Corona, and even in this process, we saw, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, some individuals met at some location and they were discussing his ouster out of the Jubilee Party. So we are going to see an escalation of his persecution within the party.
Okay. Kipchumba Karori, before I go to Parliament and take another important story in regard to the effect this will have on the political party establishment in the country, the concern has been the coming shot of the public expectation in the country by the political parties in this country and the political players. Say the Jubilee Party disintegrates because of the factional interests at the moment that are going in the wayward direction. Will it not be a further burden and a clear illustration of the already rotten state of the country's political establishment?
I think, Ayub, what we have in this country is that we must contend with the fact that we lack forthright leaders. The problem we have and the teething political problems is the problem of confusing tribal kingpins for leaders. The people who their main stock in trade is collecting tribes and the people, they speak the same language. Until and when Kenyans will decide to vote for people who are progressive, who have the minds and the capacity to comprehend Constitution 2010 and to forge that Constitution 2010 with whatever Kenyans want, and also to make sure that we live in a society whereby it is a principled society. And that's why I have always opined to the fact that we cannot fight economic corruption and allow the endemic political corruption and conmanship to be our part. Because by doing that, in the nature of how we get our votes, I come today, I ask you, are you talk to your community or your tribe, they vote for me, I'll support you. So it becomes not an election of issues and philosophies and ideologies, but an election about a political battle thread between tribes, whereby one tribe says, we will allow you to be in this, not because you are competent, but because you have allowed our tribal man to be with you. I think going forward, we must allow ourselves to build solid political parties, and political parties that can be audited, political parties that stand for an ideology, and then from there, we can allow the right people to get to leadership. But until a time when we will make sure that tribes and political parties are not in the same dichotomy, we cannot make a progress going forward.
All right, Wakili, thank you so much. Asante sana for joining us here on the broadcast, and thank you. Good afternoon. Of course, lovely to get your assertions in regard to the developments in the country, in regard to the judicial aspect, which is the coronavirus consequence on the administration of justice in the country, and equally Wakili Philip Mwangale, who after this story will be coming to finish up with before I go to the international update, and equally leave the senior and the program for that matter for the 1 p.m. news team to be able to come on set. Now, the National Assembly Minority Whip, Junet Mohammed, has cheered up members of the House by throwing a jibe at a few members who he said were a bit aged. Speaking during yesterday's special sitting for that matter, after the House resumed, the vocal Suna East Member of Parliament singled out lawmakers who he said were above the age of 58 and jokingly called on they be allowed to live as they were vulnerable and could easily be contracting the coronavirus. Parliament resumed yesterday as it implemented tough rules that the government has issued in the fight against the pandemic and the outlined measures by the government. The Speaker of the House, J.B. Muturi, had to restrict the entrance of members in the debating chamber, restricting that to just above 40, since the outline issued by the Minister of Health was a guideline which Parliament had to adhere.
Including the Honorable Junet.
Mr. Speaker, I have an issue that I want to raise with you. Mr. Speaker, the guidelines that you issued were very clear. And it's some of the best guidelines I've ever read for the safety and security of this House and members of this House. Mr. Speaker, one of your guidelines was anybody above 58 years should not appear in the chambers. And I'm seeing here Honorable Kimunya. I am seeing here Honorable Bokose. These are octogenarians who should be at home, Mr. Speaker. We don't want to lose any member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we love Another one is the MP from Meru, Honorable Kubai. Kubai retired from civil servants before we were born. And he's here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we love each other, Mr. Speaker. And I am doing it out of good faith, in good heart, Mr. Speaker. I want us to be here after Corona, Mr. Speaker. So when you are told you are above 58 or 60, stay with your grandchildren. Don't have evidence, because date of birth is written in the website of members of parliament, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that guideline is not being followed. Mr. Speaker, could you allow these people to go back to their homes and stay with their grandchildren, Mr. Speaker, at this point in time?
Allow the sergeant at arms to allow 3 members. 3 members. The first one to go to 60, seat number 60, where is that? Here. It's here. Seat number 60 is here. And those 3 members now they will be advised to stay in the other holding areas. Then there is 61. Member for Nyali, seat number 60 here. That you are walking very, very close to the Honorable Odepe.
Speaker J.B. Muturi of the National Assembly taking charge of the special sitting of members of parliament, which resumed yesterday in the debating chamber, and there speaking was the member of parliament, Junet Mohammed. Wakili Philip Mwangali, your final comments on the ruling Jubilee Party and equally the conversations that we had in regard to the political development in the country. Is it a case of now President Uhuru Kenyatta being categorical here, notwithstanding the proxy sort of political wars that has been deployed by the former member of parliament, David Murathi, and has the president indirectly told the DP, William Ruto, like it, like him, lump it, lump him, Raila is here to stay?
First, on Junet, when you hear Junet speaking, I think the only comment I can give is this parliament and the National Assembly gut jokes. Because if they were any serious, they will be doing more than that. But first, on the issue you've raised, the fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta has not come out in defense of his deputy William Ruto could only mean one thing: that he's either in cahoots with those that are assaulting the deputy president, or he does not care that whatever is happening to William Ruto is happening anyway. But those two things point to one fact, that he will possibly not be supporting the deputy president in 2022. But I must also say this, that it is unfortunate that the political intrigues within the Jubilee Party have taken center stage. Because the people who are involved, and this is the unfortunate bit, and I would like to refer also to what Kipchumba mentioned, that we need to get to a point where our democracy is matured, our political parties are matured. They are political parties that are founded on ideology. And for us to get to that point, we will have to make sure that those who are in political office are not involved in the health and the general running of political parties. Because what we are seeing right now, and it's unfortunate that the Secretary General of Jubilee Party is a member of cabinet without portfolio. I don't know how we have managed to accept that to this extent. We have officials of the party within positions of leadership in the country. And if we accept that, then we are tinkering with the possibility of them mixing the health of the political party and the health of the political leadership of the country. And that is the unfortunate bit that we have found ourselves in. So going forward, I think we must rethink our political party systems. We must rethink how governance intermarries with the political parties.
Asante sana, Wakili Philip Mwangali. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you too.
So we take a look at the developments across the international scene. And this, of course, regards the coronavirus pandemic, the coverage so far given by Johns Hopkins University in regard to the pandemic. and what needs to be done. So we take a look at the numbers so far provided by Johns Hopkins University. Total confirmed number of cases, 1,982,552. America leads the pack with 609,422 of that. Spain, Italy, Germany, France, the UK follow in that order, which are all in Europe. Then China comes, Iran in the Middle East, Turkey in Europe, Belgium in Europe, Netherlands in Europe, Canada, Switzerland, Brazil, Russia, Portugal, Austria, Israel, India, and the list goes on. The total number of deaths, 126,753. Of that, Italy is leading with 21,067, followed by Spain with 18,000, France with 15. Of course, the US lies somewhere here. And the total number of tests done in the United States of America, 2,120,381, which, of course, of that, New York State accounts for 499,143. Comes Florida, California, Texas, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Washington, Louisiana, Illinois, Michigan, Tennessee, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Maryland, Missouri, Utah, Indiana, Connecticut, that is Virginia, Wisconsin, Colorado, Minnesota, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, and the list goes on and on. This is the total cases that you have on your screens, and the dashboard here is a classical representation of the numbers that continue to grow outside China but have flattened. The curve has flattened in China. This is, of course, the European continent, presumably as of March 2020, and the cases that are likely to hit 2 million by the end of this afternoon. And of course, down then you have the bar graph, which is a representation of the cases that are exponentially growing outside China. By April 15th, 11th to 15th, you can see how the barcodes, which are shaded in yellow, are going up. Now, coming to the graphical representation, you can see how the world is faring in terms of the Asian part and the African end, where there are no new active cases, but the continent continues to grapple with the already identified cases and confirmed across the continent, while the international community, the World Health Organization, is turning its attention to the United States of America that you are seeing on your screens, which is shaded hot red in terms of course, the representation that the US has become the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. Let's come to the BBC and what it has highlighted in terms of the report that regards the coronavirus pandemic. And this is a concern to the United Nations equally, because the United States of America will halt funding the World Health Organization, according to President Donald Trump, who has been deeply skeptical of the Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus-led World Health Organization, the Director General, of falling short of expectation in terms of vaccine development, coordinating response across the globe, and why he says America remains skeptical and purposely part of course, the Trump America First policy, which has been his slogan since coming to power in January 2017. And possibly some are skeptical in the United States, including Americans themselves, who tend not to believe so much in Donald Trump and see him as perhaps a person who has lied so much of the critical affairs across the globe, pulled out the United States from the Paris Climate Accord of 2015, pulled out the United States from the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, and also as negotiated under the Obama administration, castigated Canada and Mexico in the trade deal between the two nations, has embraced Saudi Arabia, a dictatorship, and of course, despite assessment by the intelligence agencies in the United States of America, which implicated the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of ordering the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi descent who was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in Turkey in October 2018, and has embraced dictators like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, met him twice in Singapore and equally in Hanoi in Vietnam, and cases of course growing concerns about his political ground and Americans losing jobs ahead of a nationalistic year in 2020 in November, when they will be heading to the ballot. Therefore, this is a concern for many Americans, as is the case with the UN, which says now this is not the time for Trump to do that. And Antonio Guterres-led organization says that this is the time that countries need to be coordinated in response in terms of responding to the coronavirus pandemic, which is a global threat, has halted economies. The New York Stock Exchange was halted until Trump pumped about $2 trillion in an economy that is 23 trillion, which is just a drop in the ocean in the American economy, and the concern of the effect it has had on the supply chain demand in the United States of America and equally in China, and the accusations on the Xi Jinping-led government from the White House press briefing room, when he said that this is a Chinese virus, before now hitting 600,000, and the concern among the international community as to America now offering the global leadership needed, which at some point was offered by President Obama in 2009 when he, of course, pulled the European leaders together after the financial crisis of 2009, which saw off the Eurozone bailing out countries like Greece, which were struggling with debt in the European Union. Then you have the CNN mapping aspect of the United States of America here, and the BBC's continuous coverage of the United States and what is transpiring in regard to this, of course, the myths about the coronavirus pandemic and what you need to know, what, of course, to ignore, and in regard to the reality check offered by Chris Morris, who is the BBC broadcaster, and bust more health myths about COVID-19 being shared online by the global citizenry across the world. The flight radar here, equally, you can see how airlines are not so busy, especially in the African continent, because of course, the imposition of flight bans, international flight bans by African governments to control the pandemic. But in Asia, you can see how the airlines are busy in airspaces across China, in South Korea, in Vietnam, in the Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and equally in Europe, where there is inter-European busy airline, but no flight can cross the Atlantic Ocean to the United States of America because of the ban imposed by Donald Trump on European flights coming from the European Union. That's where we come to an end here on the broadcast. In about 6 minutes' time, my colleague will be here to bring you up to speed with the up-to-date news. I need to leave the scene. A lot has been discussed in regard to the judiciary, the impact coronavirus has had on the dispensation of justice, and of course what needs to be done in terms of digitization, the judiciary taking lessons when the dust finally settles on COVID-19, and why Kenyans are deeply skeptical amid, of course, the other underlying problems, which are corruption, integrity issues, that is equally present and rife in other institutions in government. And of course, at the top of the hour, you'll get much more in regard to other developments in the country. And later on Ibro Magharibi, my colleagues will be here to brief you on the regular pressures issued by the Ministry of Health in the country as per the response so far outlined by the government in the coordinated effort by the National Committee that is set to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. Abdiaziz Hashim will be here shortly. I'm leaving the scene. We'll see you tomorrow on the Primetime News. And on News Compass, we'll be hosting Honorable Farah Malim talking about matters education with education experts as per COVID-19 impact on the education sector, even as the CS George Magoha says that the calendar will continue as earlier planned by the Ministry of Education. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Asante sana. Good afternoon. Wait for the 1 p.m. news. Thank you.